Ladies and gentlemen, imagine being the one they thought they could replace until the day they realize they can't. Imagine walking away from someone who kept you at arm's length, only to have them wake up and see you were the rarest thing they'd ever touch. And they let it slip through their fingers. This is the moment the avoidant understands you were never replaceable. And by then, it's far too late. There's a moment in life that feels like a quiet earthquake, not the kind that knocks everything to the ground instantly, but the kind that shifts the plates under your feet in a way you don't notice right away, until suddenly the world looks different. It's the moment when someone who once kept you at arm's length realizes that you were never replaceable. For a long time, they treated connection like a negotiation. They rationed affection, they pulled away when things got too close, and they made you doubt the weight you carried in their life. Maybe you questioned your worth in the silence between their texts. Maybe you replayed conversations, wondering if you'd been too much or not enough. You tried to meet them where they were, even though where they were often meant meeting them halfway across a canyon while they stayed on their side. And yet you stayed true to who you were. You gave the kind of love that didn't need to shout to be valuable. You showed up consistently, not perfectly, but with honesty. You were the one who remembered the things they said in passing. The one who made space for their storms without demanding sunshine on your timeline. You saw the parts of them they didn't think were lovable, and you loved them anyway. Avoidant people deep down aren't trying to hurt you, they're trying to protect themselves. Their distance is armor, their mixed signals a way to control risk. But here's the truth, when you're genuine, patient, and rooted in your one worth, you can't be replaced, not because you're clingy or because you gave endlessly, but because what you offered was rare, and rare things aren't interchangeable. At some point, the noise of the world gets quiet enough for them to hear the echo of your absence. They notice how other conversations don't feel the same, how other faces don't make them laugh the way you did, how someone else can do all the right things but still feel like a flat imitation. They start to realize that your particular combination of kindness, depth, and spark is something they can't just find again by swiping or waiting. Here's the interesting thing about this realization. It's not loud. It's not a grand gesture where they burst in with flowers and confessions. It's subtle, almost haunting. They might remember a joke you told out of nowhere. They might hear a song and think of the way you hummed along without knowing the words. They might walk past a place you once stood together, and suddenly they're hit with the strange bittersweet knowledge that you were a chapter they didn't fully read while they had the chance. For you, this moment is not about revenge or validation, it's about perspective. Because if you've ever loved an avoidant, you know the temptation to think, maybe if I had done more, they would have stayed. Maybe if I had been a little less intense, they wouldn't have pulled away. That kind of thinking is a trap. The truth is, people only understand irreplaceability when they're ready to receive it. You could have been the most perfect version of yourself, and if they weren't ready to value it, it would have still slipped through their fingers. So what do you do with this knowledge? You let it teach you something powerful, that your value never depended on their recognition of it. The fact that they now see what they missed doesn't make you more valuable. It just murs. Eons, they finally caught up to the truth that was always there. You don't need their clarity to confirm your worth. But yes, it is a kind of poetic justice, because while they were pushing away, they believed they had infinite time, infinite options. They believed you were one of many. And now they've learned the hard way that there is no many when it comes to a soul that sees you fully and chooses you anyway. They might meet people who check boxes, but they won't meet another you. There's a quiet power in knowing that someone's life is forever marked by your presence, even if they never get it back. You don't have to gloat, you don't have to prove anything, you don't have to perform your happiness for them to see it. Just keep living in alignment with the love and integrity you always carried. That is the part of you they couldn't hold on to, but it's also the part of you that will keep attracting better Think about the times you doubted yourself because of their inability to commit. Think about the nights you stared at your phone, wondering if silence was an answer in itself. Think about how small you tried to make yourself so they wouldn't feel overwhelmed. And then think about the fact that despite all that, you never lost the core of who you are. That resilience, that ability to still believe in love, even after they made you feel like it was too much to ask for, that's what makes you irreplaceable. When they finally understand, it's not just about missing you, it's about realizing that they missed out on a version of themselves they could have grown into with you. That's the part that stings for them. They didn't just lose you, they lost the opportunity to become someone braver, someone softer, someone capable of meeting you where you stood. And that's not something they can just recreate with someone else. And while they're sitting with that, you're already walking forward. You've learned that your worth is not a bargaining chip. You've learned that real connection can't happen if one person is always retreating. You've learned that someone's inability to hold you doesn't mean you were too heavy. It just means they weren't strong enough to carry something real. This is the kind of transformation that changes the way you love yourself. You no longer chase people who make you question your place. You no longer explain your needs like they're unreasonable requests. You no longer believe that being chosen is the same as being valued. Because now you understand, the right person won't just realize you're irreplaceable after you're gone. They'll recognize it while they have you, and they'll act like it. And until then, you can stand in the unshakable knowledge that you were always the rare thing, that the loss was never yours. The loss was never yours, and that's the part that takes time to fully believe. Because for a while, the ache in your chest can trick you into thinking you were the one left behind. The truth is, you didn't lose someone who could truly meet you. You released someone who wasn't ready to stand beside you in the way you deserved, and in doing so, you opened the door for something that won't require you to shrink or settle. You see, there's a strange sort of courage in letting someone walk away when you know your value. It's not about indifference, it's about self-respect. It's about saying, I won't teach you to see me. I'll give you the opportunity, but if you choose to close your eyes, I won't keep standing here in the dark waiting for you to look. That courage doesn't come overnight. It's built in the quiet moments when you choose your peace over your pride, your dignity, over your desire to be understood. When the avoidant finally realizes you were never replaceable, their mind will often reach for a narrative that makes the loss feel reversible. They might think, if I just say the right thing, maybe I can get to them back. But here's where your growth becomes undeniable, because you're no longer waiting for them to understand in order to move forward. You've already been moving. The version of you they remember is still in here, but she's evolved. He's wiser. They're stronger. You've discovered that love without consistency is just a promise without action. You've learned that chemistry is not commitment and attraction is not devotion. And because you've learned those lessons, you now have boundaries that aren't walls. They're doors with locks. And you decide who gets the key. You no longer open that door for someone who treated your heart like a revolving one. And isn't it interesting how life works? The moment you stop chasing someone's recognition, you become more magnetic. Not because you're playing games, but because self-worth has a gravity of its own. The avoidant who once held back will feel that shift. They'll notice the way your laughter sounds different now, fuller, less searching. They'll notice that you're no longer orbiting around their availability, you're building your own galaxy. And deep down, that unsettles them. Not because they want control, but because they finally see what they took for granted. What they don't always understand is that by the time they arrive at this realization, the chapter is already closed. Yes, they can remember it, reread it in their mind, but they can't rewrite it. You're not the same person they left in that chapter. You're the author now, and you've moved on to a story where the love is mutual, the energy is reciprocal, and the commitment is present. This is why you must resist the urge to prove your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, because if they couldn't see it when you were giving them the best of you, it's not your job to break yourself apart to make it clearer. Your energy is better spent becoming so rooted in who you are that no one's recognition or lack of it can shake you. You'll find that the moment you stop trying to be chosen by someone avoidant is the moment you start choosing yourself. And choosing yourself doesn't mean you become closed off or cold. It means you approach love with open eyes. You no longer fall for potential. You watch for patterns. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. You look for presence. You no longer stay for promises. You stay for follow-through. And when you love from that place, you start attracting people who don't need to lose you to realize what they have. People who don't confuse your independence with disinterest and your vulnerability with weakness. People who know how to be close without feeling trapped and how to give space without disappearing. Here's the beauty in all of this. The avoidance realization is not your reward. Your reward is the freedom you gain when you stop measuring your value through someone else's fear of intimacy. Their awakening may be late, but your awakening was right on time. You got to step into a new season where you are no longer trying to earn love. You're simply sharing it with someone who's already decided to meet you fully. There's something deeply satisfying about watching your own transformation from the inside. You'll remember the moments you wanted to send one more message just to explain yourself. The moments you thought, if they could just see me clearly, everything would change. And then you'll realize it did change, not because they saw you, but because you saw yourself. That's when your healing stops being about them and starts being about you. The avoidance understanding of your irreplaceability might feel like closure, but it's not the kind you wait for. It's the kind that happens naturally when you've already healed. Their words, their regret, their nostalgia, it can't pull you back into the same place because you've outgrown it. It's like trying to wear shoes 2 sizes too small, no matter how much you once loved them, that don't fit who you've become. Sometimes they'll reach out with small gestures, testing the waters, a message that says, hey, remember when? A subtle compliment slipped into casual conversation. These are not bad things, but they're not commitments either. They're echoes, not invitations. And you, having learned your worth, will smile kindly and keep walking toward the life you're building. You'll notice that your boundaries no longer feel like walls. They feel like safety. They're the reason you no longer tolerate uncertainty disguised as mystery. They're the reason you no longer put your dreams on pause while waiting for someone to decide they're ready. And that's where your true power lies. Not in making someone stay, but in knowing you will still thrive if they don't. The avoidance realization is powerful for them, but for you, it's confirmation of something you already knew. You were never the problem. Your love wasn't too much. Your needs weren't unreasonable, and your presence wasn't ordinary. What they couldn't handle wasn't your fault, it was their limitation. And limitations, unless they're addressed, don't magically disappear just because someone misses you. That's why your focus now is not on being missed, it's on being met. Met with the same energy you give, met with honesty, consistency, and respect, met with the kind of love that doesn't flinch when things get close. And the beautiful thing is you'll recognize that love instantly when it arrives, because you've learned how to recognize when it's absent. And in that moment, when you're standing in the kind of relationship that doesn't require you to earn your place, you'll look back on the avoidance delayed realization with compassion, not longing. Because you'll understand that everyone is on their own timeline and some people won't reach yours in time. That doesn't make them bad, it just makes them not yours. The real transformation here is that you no longer see their inability to hold you as a rejection. You see it as redirection, away from a story that kept you small toward one where you can expand without fear. You begin to realize that the space they left wasn't empty. It was room for someone better aligned to step in. The avoidance understanding is a mirror they now have to look into. but your understanding is a door you've already walked through. And once you've stepped into the world where you're valued in real time, you won't go back to being a memory in someone else's story. You'll keep writing your own. And that's where the real magic unfolds. Because once you've experienced the freedom of choosing yourself, the entire way you move through relationships changes. You stop chasing people who treat you like an option. You stop waiting for permission to take up space. You stop handing over the pen to someone who can't commit to finishing the chapter with you. When the avoidant finally understands you were never replaceable, it's not a revelation that changes the past. It's a moment that reflects the truth you've been living all along. And while it may be bittersweet for them, it becomes a moment of quiet affirmation for you. It confirms that you were never imagining your worth, that your presence really was unique, and that the depth you brought into their life left an imprint they can't erase. But here's the crucial thing. You don't build your life around being missed. You build it around being present. The danger of waiting for someone's recognition is that it traps you in a loop of hope and disappointment, measuring your happiness against their level of clarity. Once you break that cycle, you start seeing yourself through your own eyes again. And in doing so, you create a standard that makes settling impossible. The shift is subtle at first. You start saying no to things you would have tolerated before. You stop responding to breadcrumbs that once would have kept you hanging on. You begin investing more time in people who make you feel safe to be yourself. And without realizing it, you're building a new foundation, one made not of longing for someone to catch up, but of gratitude for those who are already here. Meanwhile, the person who once kept you at a distance is left to sit with the contrast. They may meet others. They may even start something new, but the texture of connection feels different. They might try to convince themselves it's better, easier, lighter. Yet there's a quiet ache that appears when they least expect it, a reminder that ease without depth can feel hollow, and lightness without trust can still feel heavy. That ache isn't your responsibility to soothe. Once upon a time, you might have been tempted to go back, to give them another chance to feel what they missed. But now, you've learned that it's not your job to reteach someone your value. The lesson isn't in your return, it's in your absence. And their realization, however profound, doesn't entitle them to a replay of the story. Your growth has taken you to a place where love isn't about proving, persuading, or performing. It's about aligning. You've learned that the right connection doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't require you to be the constant gardener while the other person drifts in and out like the weather. The right connection feels like two people standing side by side, both holding the weight of the relationship, both tending to the roots. And the more you live from that truth, the more you see the difference between someone who values you in theory and someone who values you in practice. The avoidance realization might make them wish they had shown up differently, but wishing isn't the same as changing. You've reached a stage where you no longer confuse the two. You know that regret without action is just sentiment, and sentiment doesn't sustain love. It's empowering to reach the place Ben. Here you can look back without bitterness. You can remember the moments of closeness without needing to rewrite the ending. You can acknowledge the ways they added to your life without overlooking the ways they held back. This isn't denial or detachment, it's clarity. And clarity is the kind of strength that keeps you from reopening doors that were closed for your protection. You start to understand that love is not about getting someone to realize your worth. It's about finding someone who never forgets it. It's about being with a person who doesn't need to lose you to understand what they have. And once that becomes your baseline, you'll never again settle for relationships where you're left wondering if you matter. The irony is that the more you stand in your self-worth, the more they may want you back. They'll see the change, the confidence, the lightness that comes from no longer carrying the weight of convincing them. But the very thing that draws them in now is the same thing that means you can't go back. Because you've learned that love should be safe from the beginning, not a prize you earn after someone finally decides to trust you. There's a quiet beauty in knowing you've become someone who can love deeply without losing yourself. You've built the resilience to walk away from half-hearted efforts, no matter how much history there is. And in doing so, you've made room for the kind of love that will meet you fully. The avoidance realization might come with words, apologies, acknowledgements, admissions they never would have made before. Or it might come in silence, long stretches where you know they're thinking of you but can't bring themselves to reach out. Either way, the power is no longer in their hands. You've stopped needing them to say what you already know. And here's the thing about being irreplaceable. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about the way you show up with both your strengths and your flaws, the way you love with both your courage and your fear, the way you stay authentic, even when someone else's uncertainty tries to make you doubt yourself. That kind of presence can't be replicated and it can't be manufactured. That's why, when they realize it's gone, it lingers in their mind. Not because you were flawless, but because you were genuine. And genuine connections are rare in a world that's often more concerned with appearances than depth. You may never hear the full story of what your absence has meant to them. You may never know how many times they've thought of you or compared others to you. And that's okay, because your healing doesn't require their confession. You've already moved forward without it. What matters now is that you protect the version of yourself you've become, that you don't let nostalgia convince you to settle for the very dynamic you worked so hard to grow out of, that you keep walking toward the kind of love that doesn't make you choose between closeness and freedom. Because the truth is, you can have both. You can have love that feels safe without feeling suffocating. You can have connection that's deep without being draining. You can have someone who shows up without you having to beg for their presence. And you deserve nothing less. So when the avoidant finally understands you were never replaceable, remember this: their realization is their journey. Your journey is knowing you've built a life where you no longer need to wait for anyone to see your worth. You're too busy living it. And in living it, you attract the kind of love that recognizes it from the very start. You're too busy living it, and that's the part they never saw coming. They thought you'd always be there. Maybe not always in reach, but always within arm's length if they decided to pull you close again. They underestimated how quietly and completely you could move on once you realized the story wasn't going to change. And in that underestimation, they lost something far greater than they ever imagined. Because here's the thing about people who believe they have time. They don't notice the clock until it's silent. They don't see the moments slipping away until they look back and realize the view has changed and you're no longer in it. What they thought was a pause was actually the end. And the ending wasn't a sudden dramatic event. It was a quiet choice you made over and over to stop waiting for someone to meet you where you already stood. When they finally understand you were never replaceable, it's not just about the loss of you as a person. It's the loss of what they could have been with you. It's the loss of the version of themselves that only showed up in your presence, the one that felt braver, warmer, more open. They see now that what they thought was just you being you was also an invitation to step into something deeper, and they didn't take it. You, on the other hand, have learned that you can't carry someone to their own readiness. You can't drag them to the door of intimacy and push them through. Readiness is an inside job, and no amount of love, patience, or effort can substitute for someone's decision to actually walk toward you. You gave them the opportunity, but you stopped sacrificing yourself in the process. That's what changed everything. It's not that you stopped caring, you just stopped carrying it all alone. You stopped holding the rope on both ends. You stopped confusing your persistence with love, realizing that love is only love when it's mutual. And the moment you made that shift, you started reclaiming the energy you had been pouring into the wrong places, and that energy your time, your joy, your presence has now become fuel for a life that feels fuller. You've filled your days with things and people that nourish you, with experiences that remind you who you are outside of the dynamic that once made you feel small. You've discovered hobbies, passions, and goals that have nothing to do with being chosen by someone else. You've learned that you are the constant in your own story, and everyone else is either a complement to your life or a distraction from it. When they see this new version of you, it's like looking at someone they recognize but can't quite reach. You're familiar, but you're not accessible in the way you once were. They can feel the shift, even if they can't put it into words. The way your eyes no longer search for their approval, the way your voice no longer bends to keep the peace, the way your energy no longer leans toward them. It's a kind of confidence that can't be faked, and they know it didn't come from them, it came from you choosing you. This is where the power dynamic completely changes. Before, you may have felt like you were on the receiving end of their choices, waiting for their text, their clarity, their decision. Now, the only choice that matters is yours, and the choice you've made is to keep walking toward a life that reflects your value in real time, not in hindsight. It's not about being hard or unforgiving, it's about being clear. You've reached a point where you no longer entertain people who make you question your place in their life. You no longer cling to connections that require you to diminish yourself to fit. You no longer confuse the comfort of familiarity with the safety of love. And as much as they may now want to step back into your life, you understand something they didn't. Love without action is just sentiment, and sentiment alone can't build a future. Their regret might be real, their longing might be real, but so is your need for consistency, reciprocity, and presence. And that's not negotiable anymore. You've learned to separate missing someone from needing them. You can acknowledge the good memories without letting them rewrite the truth of what it was like when they were in your life. You can appreciate the role they played in why. Our growth without handing them a role in your future. That's what makes you free, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of boundaries. What they're feeling now is a collision of memory and reality. In memory, you're still there, laughing at their jokes, understanding their moods, filling the spaces they couldn't fill themselves. In reality, you're living a life that no longer orbits around their gravity. That gap is where their realization lives, and it's where your liberation thrives. And here's the paradox. When you were there, fully present, they couldn't see the magnitude of what they had. But now that you're gone, they can't unsee it. It's woven into their thoughts, into the comparisons they make without meaning to, into the quiet moments when they realize the connection they had with you was more than just special. It was rare. And rare doesn't just walk back in the door. The more you lean into your own life, the more you realize you don't need to be understood by everyone, especially not by someone who only learned to see your value after you left. The right people will recognize it from the start, and they won't treat it like a risk they're afraid to take. They'll treat it like a gift they want to protect. You're no longer building a case for your worth in someone else's court. You're living as if you already know the verdict, and you do. You're worthy not because someone finally decided you are, but because you always have been. And now that you've stopped asking for proof, you're free to live like it. In this space, love stops being about scarcity and starts being about abundance. You stop worrying about who will replace you because you know you were never competing in the first place. You stop clinging to the idea that someone has to come back for it to mean you mattered. You mattered regardless. You mattered when you were there, and you matter now that you're gone. And perhaps the most liberating realization is this: you no longer need their realization to mean anything for you. It can be theirs to carry, theirs to process, theirs to live with. Your life isn't waiting on it. You're not holding a seat at the table for someone who left you standing. You've filled that seat with people who show up and stay. You've stopped looking for yourself in someone else's eyes. You've stopped measuring your worth against someone else's readiness. You've stopped trying to earn what should be freely given. And in that, you've built a version of yourself that even you couldn't have imagined back when you were still hoping for them to choose you. They may always think of you as the one who got away, but you don't think of yourself as the one who was lost. You think of yourself as the one who finally found themselves, and that difference changes everything.